Afternoon everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean Butler, a very fluey Sean Butler. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things you love with people that you love doing them with. Bugsy Malone should be over my shoulder coming into shot in a moment or two. She's missed you all because I haven't been out doing these the last 3 or 4 days. I've been in bed trying to get better. Sorry about that, guys. But listen, we're going to try and get one thrown out for you today. I would say that there's been loads to catch up on. But there hasn't, has there, Bugs? There really hasn't been a lot of news to get through. Obviously, we had the debacle of the Thailand trip, and then the losing of a precious fixture. The preparation work is difficult to get done. Is there any movement on the Harry Kane saga? Not particularly. Is there any movement on bringing in centre-backs? Not particularly. Postecoglou did say today in his press conference that they are looking to bring in at least one new centre-back. And I guess the number and the quality of those centre-backs will depend on a number of factors, but none the least of which would be whether or not we move players out and how much money we get for them. And the first story I do want to talk about, which is meaningful, is the story that Davinson Sanchez has had a 12 million euro bid from Spartak Moscow that apparently has been accepted by Tottenham Hotspur, and that we're willing to let him go over to Russia, and now it's just up to Davinson Sanchez to make his mind up on whether or not he's willing to go and whether or not personal terms can be agreed, which is unusual. It's unusual because generally speaking personal terms are agreed before the bids come in. This time round it looks like the bidders come in, Tottenham want him gone, would happily take the 12 million, but Sanchez hasn't necessarily got there yet. And I think the rationale for why he doesn't want to go is pretty easy to understand. I know that as Tottenham fans, we all like to see the back of him, move him on, and then allow for space in the squad to bring in at least one of those two players. Hopefully when that's done, we can then find a new home for someone like Joe Rodon and then get the other guy in. All these things take time, but on this particular one, I personally could understand if Davinson Sanchez turned it down, and it's not only because of commercial or financial reasons. You know, first and foremost, Russia, teams in Russia are currently banned from playing European football because of the war that's going on. You know, whether or not Russian teams should be punished as a consequence of the actions of their country's owner or country's president, I don't know how I feel about that, but decisions above my pay grade. Let's presume that that's not going to be lifted anytime soon. Then does Davinson Sanchez really see himself playing in Europe in the coming seasons? Possibly not. There's a reason in and of itself to maybe think twice about the move. The second rationale, I guess, is the moral dilemma of moving to a country that is at war with Ukraine, and you know, whether or not you're okay with that as a person. And you could understand the rationale if he said, I'm not okay with that, either on a ethical and moral perspective or on a safety perspective. What's to say that the war doesn't change direction and some, you know, aggression is thrown actually into Russia as well? Does he want to move his family to a place that is potentially going to be on the receiving end of bombs and chaos? Understandable if he says no to that. And of course the third factor, which, you know, I think is also incredibly relevant, is the fact that, you know, Russian teams, supporters, have a historical track record of, you know, racial abuse being thrown towards black players when those players for those teams have gone into Russia, or when they've met in international games or in European games for the clubs. There's not a massive amount of black players that have played for Russian teams, and so is it also a fair consideration of whether he wants to expose himself to that sort of behaviour as well? So even if Spartak Moscow can afford and match his wages, there's reasons outside of monetary purposes that I think are very justified and valid. So as much as it frustrated me in January when Davinson Sanchez turned down a move away from Tottenham because he didn't want to lose the money he was getting paid and he wanted to stay, for this particular deal, for this particular opportunity for him, I'm not going to sit there and hold his feet to the fire and call him names or expect him to move to Spartak Moscow. If he decides to go, fair play to him. I wish him well. If he decides to say no to it, I'll also respect that decision. Be interesting to know what your thoughts are. Obviously we want to prioritise Tottenham Hotspur, but of course there is a human being at the end of the story, and I can respect the wishes of that man in this circumstantial scenario. Personally, I would just hope that there's other teams out there that don't have those same, I don't know, complex environments that might see value in him and that could match the offer and make everything a little bit more simplistic. Time will tell, but of course the lack of movement on players going out of the club is probably a large reason as to why Daniel Levy and Joe Lewis and the team at Tottenham are not yet willing to pull the trigger on players like Mickey van der Ven, players like Edmund Tapsoba. And what I would also say, guys, is it always takes two to tango in any negotiation. Blackburn Rovers have apparently started playing silly beggars with regards Ashley Phillips. Apparently we thought it was a done deal at a certain valuation, and now Blackburn Rovers have asked to put an extra 3 or 4 million on top, which again might only sound like, oh, it's only 3 or 4 million, but if that's another 100% on top of the current asking price, then pound for pound it does add up. It does make a difference. So you have to always make sure you're baking in what are the variables that are slowing down these transfers. And I'd imagine that exactly the same sort of things are happening with regards Van der Ven and Wolfsburg owners. Do they really want to lose him for whatever the money is, X amount of money, if they think that perhaps the Harry Kane saga will eventually play out in a scenario that sees Tottenham have 90 million quid in their bank account? And if so, they'll want to get as much of that money as they can. So there could be very easily a scenario where both of those teams, Leverkusen and Wolfsburg, are dragging their feet in the hope that the Bayern Munich move will happen sooner rather than later, and they can dip their toe slightly deeper into the Tottenham pool of money. I think you could make the same argument for what's happening at West Ham United. Not to get off topic, but West Ham fans must be pretty frustrated right now. Declan Rice has moved for £105 million, give or take, to Arsenal. West Ham are, cash wealthy right now. And as soon as that deal was done, every single team who West Ham knock on the door of and ask for valuations of the players that they're interested in, James Ward-Prowse, Helinia from Fulham, Conor Gallagher, etc., Sofiane Amrabat, to all of those teams, when West Ham come knocking, the price is increased by 15-20%. It's only natural, because West Ham are desperate to replace the players, or to replace Declan Rice. They're desperate to improve. They haven't signed a single player yet. They don't want to overspend on players, but the clubs that are willing to sell their players want to take advantage of the additional wealth that West Ham have. It's a chicken and the egg. We saw it however many years ago it was with Gareth Bale money. We all knew that we were spending the Gareth Bale money early, and I think Daniel Levy maybe asked Real Madrid to say, look, we're done, it's done, but let's not confirm it until the end of the window so that we can do our business and replace the players without other clubs knowing. But I think it's hard to keep a secret like that when you're going around buying 7 or 8 players. I think everyone knows the situation. I think West Ham are facing the consequences of it, and to a degree, guys, I worry whether or not Tottenham are also facing the consequences of it. When you have the combination of a desperate need for improvements in a specific area and a likely scenario playing out where you're going to have a lot of money burning a hole in your pocket, other clubs are going to take advantage. It's very frustrating, especially when you have a chairman like Daniel Levy, who is always penny wise and pound foolish, and always overvalues his own assets significantly higher than the valuations he places on other teams. Then you end up with Mexican standoffs when no one wants to shoot first. I just hope that this whole saga gets to a natural conclusion sooner rather than later, and I hope just for once that Tottenham land on their feet in the most positive way as possible, because right now, if I'm Ange Postecoglou, I'm incredibly frustrated with the lack of progress of getting players out of the door, the lack of progress of bringing in key targets and giving them the precious moments on the training ground and in the pre-season friendlies when they happen. There's so much change happening at Tottenham, so much being asked of the players to learn new systems, build new chemistries. A lot of players, we don't know if they're going to be here or not. And yet, the things that could have been done earlier to take care of and give Ange the best rolling start possible haven't. And it's just another very, very frustrating period for Tottenham fans. You know, if you've been listening to me on live streams recently, I've said it. I've never been more frustrated with the ownership than I am currently. I don't think it needs to be this way. I do understand that there are variables outside of the club that are influencing the ability to make these decisions happen. But sometimes if you give a little, you get a little back. And that to me is a thought process that I don't think ever crosses Daniel Levy's mind. Like, subscribe and comment, guys. Let me know your thoughts. And as always, bye-bye.